Hey, it's John and Mike, brew-stews.com, and we are going to discuss international bittering units.
Oh God, really? Yes. IBUs.
What are IBUs, and what do they really mean in today's beer culture? Also known as Mike's IBU rant, as he said it. Like, can we just get on YouTube and start talking about this? I said, sure. You know, people want to hear Mike rant.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just me all the time.
Well, there was
right?
some commentary from that comment I made like 2 or 3 videos ago, 4 videos ago now maybe, about someone asked about what's the IBUs in a recipe, and I said, oh, don't get me started on IBUs. And so here we are tonight talking about
shaking your fist.
Getting me started, and we'll let it run.
Okay, so all right. So what is an IBU, Mike?
So technically speaking, an IBU at its purest form scientifically is actually, the units of IBU is actually milligrams per liter of isomerized alpha acid. And now that sounds really nice, and that sounds like pretty distinct, and it is.
Sure.
The IBU is invented in order to try to put a scientific quantitation on beer, similar to, you can very easily measure gravity, and we have devices for that and stuff that make it really easy, okay? But so then, you know, in the early days of craft beer, bitterness was the thing that made beer different, and especially American craft beer. There was the IBU wars of like the early aughts, right? Just people trying to get more and more bitterness into a beer for some reason. I don't know why. I never enjoyed that. I never did. I never liked bitter beer, super bitter beer. I like bitter beer, but you know, so that's what it is. But it's more complicated than just saying milligrams per liter. So an IBU, the actual way you calculate an IBU is equal to the amount of alpha acid unit, which we'll cover that in a second, times the amount of utilization, and that's where the trouble comes from. And then there's like, usually you need some sort of conversion factor if you're working in metric or you're working in imperial systems. So we won't get into that because we're not going to cover that here. But so an alpha acid unit, very simply speaking, is the amount of hops in ounces times the percent alpha acid. So if you had a 7.5% alpha acid hop and you use 1 ounce, you'd have 1 times 7.5 is 7.5 alpha acid units. If you had 2, you'd be at 15 alpha acid units, right?
Good job.
And you define that then saying, okay, I added so many alpha acid units at 60 minutes, so many alpha acid units at 5 minutes, whatever. Again, that part of the calculation isn't hard to come up with, but it is that utilization part. And when you hear about utilization, if you go online and Google hop utilization tables, you'll find all kinds of tables where they're trying to make an estimate for how much of a hop is added for how long and at what gravity, how much of that hop is actually going to isomerize in the boil. Most importantly, those tables are 100% based on isomerization in the boil, right? So this is then the beginning of my rant for the IBU, right? Is that we quantitate every recipe generator you use, wants to then also say, oh, at 30 minutes you've got this many IBUs, and I put in some hops at 15, or I put some hops at 5, or flame out. People want to be able to put an IBU number on things, even like hop stands and whirlpools and stuff like that. How many IBUs do I get of a mash hop? Well, so the whole system is already broken because those utilization tables are a model. They're not based on really strong data. It's a model, and a lot of your what are the models? Well, you've heard of like Tinseth, right? That's, I think it was Glenn Tinseth made that. Then there's the Rager system, and there's even the Garrett system. There's a couple other weird ones out there too. And those guys are all using mathematical models based on some data points to create a curve of isomerization over time or based on gravity. The premise there is that the higher the gravity, the less isomerization you get. But the data on that isn't perfect. And so all of those models are wrong. And to plagiarize a very popular quote in modeling, but some of those models are useful. So I know that Jamil Zainasheff has often said in the past that pick a utilization that you like, whether it be Tinseth or Jamil often use Rager, but most of us use Tinseth most of the time. Use that and stick with it, because when you taste it and go, like we've talked about before, I think we need about 30 IBUs in almost every beer we make just to get the right balance. But that's just my palate. as long as I don't change up the way we calculate the IBUs, I know when it's not hoppy enough, I'm going to add a little bit more, right? How much more is up for grabs, but my biggest thing with IBUs, it only really works with 60-minute additions, to the extent that it does work at all, right? So I mean, it works pretty good, but at 60 minutes, after that, everything after that is sort of a crapshoot, because why are you adding hops later in the boil anyway? Not because of bitterness. Yet we keep talking about IBUs for late additions, and that to me is just ridiculous. Now in the modern beer culture, we live in a world where a lot of brewers, professional brewers making New England style IPA aren't even adding hops in the boil. It's all late kettle addition. So the idea of using an IBU at all to quantitate anything really becomes a crapshoot. In fact, why not just say I added 200 alpha acid units dry hop?
Yep.
Right? That makes sense, and that's easily quantifiable, right? If you had, a 10% alpha acid, you'd know you'd added, what that is, 20 ounces or something to get to 200. So that's pretty interesting. And I'll just also add too that in the Scott Janis, the new IPA book, in here, IBU in the index. IBU in this whole book, the new IPA, IBU appears only twice in the index.
Huh.
Isomerization only appears 4 times.
Wow.
Right? So even in here, Scott Janis just said, I'm not dealing with IBUs because it's sort of like an old school, a very old world way of putting numbers into a beer, into a spec sheet, into the BJCP, or up on the board when you go to your favorite tap room. I mean, I still go to those tap rooms when I see something that says 70 IBUs, I go, I'm not having that one. I'm going down the list
30.
to something different, right? You know what I mean? So it's interesting. I just wish there was a better way for us to communicate hop character.
True that.
As a scientist, this totally gets my goat, because I have to live in this world of like numbers versus not having numbers, being like art versus science. But I just wish there was a better way for us to communicate how much hop character we put in at 5 minutes, or how much. Like, I don't understand why we can't adopt like alpha acid units. If we go back 35 plus years ago to The Joy of Homebrewing by Charlie Papazian, he used HBUs, right? Homebrewing units, which is the same thing as alpha acid units, really. He just did that multiplication. I mean, it makes sense. If I told you there's so many alpha acid units at 5 minutes, you could adjust your Centennial hops for my Centennial hops and just do it.
Whatever I have in my lot.
And replicate it very easily without wondering, did I use Tinzith? Did I use Rager? What's my gravity? What if your gravity's off 5 points from my gravity? Right? It all just falls apart at that point. So IBU, while it's a great concept, I think it's like something that just, the amount of research into it later on just sort of fell by the wayside, because we were just so crazy as early craft brewers to be like, IBUs, 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 right?
I know.
60 minute, 90 minute, 120 minute IPA, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I think too, like look at in the modern brewing world, look at like Stone Brewing. Right, Stone Brewing has retooled almost all their recipes, because you know what? Nobody likes bitter beer. I challenge no one ever did like bitter beer. What they did like, this is the rant coming on, what they did like was being part of 60, 90, 120 minute, right? They wanted to be part of, oh my God, this is so bitter. I'm in the in crowd, right? Because it's more bitter and I like it, right? It's like the indie band thing, right? I'm just into something that no one else is into, right? So the IBUs
I was into it before it was cool.
The IBUs are climbing, and people are like, yeah. But when a company like Stone retools all their recipes and pulls bitterness out of them, it sort of shows you where the modern craft beer palate has gone. Never mind the fact that we're dominated by seltzers now, which don't have any IBUs. So maybe I should just drink seltzer. I don't have to worry about IBUs anymore.
Don't do that. Don't do that. You can see the views on our seltzer video.
So you can dump a bunch of comments in the comments section and either relate to me or disagree with me, any way you want to do it. But that's the way I feel about IBUs. So I sort of leaked it out there a couple of weeks ago and just wanted to follow up and have some fun with it too. So
are we going to have IBUs in our videos when we talk about our own recipes moving forward?
Well, I think when we communicate our recipes, we usually say I put 1.5 ounces in at this time, right? So if people want me to translate that to IBUs, that's fine too. We're going to continue to transition in how we discuss recipes anyway, and
Yeah.
and communicate the information. But the most clearest way for you to replicate a recipe is for me to tell you how much and how strong it was and at what time, and not give you a number like IBU for a 5-minute addition.
All right. Well, I will try to put together my recipes and then be able to communicate that on the channel in alpha acid units. You'll have to remind me. Okay. I'll do the best I can. I mean, these are things that, you know, as we throw something together to get this weekly video out, it's kind of like, all right, did I do all the research I needed to do? The answer is no. The answer is definitely no. But the camera's rolling and we have beer to taste, and we've got to kind of do it on the fly. But maybe a little more preparation will make all of our enjoyment even that much better, right?
Comment on that.
Let the comments fly. I don't think this is like as controversial as you might think it is. No. I think you're always coming from a place of good thoughts and a well-structured argument. You know,
you watch on YouTube. The IBU lovers are going to see that thing come up in their search key, and they're going to fly in to make a comment, be like, "How dare you!" and that'll be their one comment a year. How dare you, IBUs!
Well, I'll watch them fly away and say, like, "Thank you for your comment. It's wonderful that you joined in the conversation." So, as Mike asked, comment below if you like this video. Please give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channels. We rant every once in a while, but we definitely put a weekly video out about home brewing and all kinds of cool beer stuff each and every week. For John and Mike, brew-dudes.com. Brew on.
Cheers.